The question we'll be tackling in this presentation is how COVID-19 and influenza are similar and different. We'll be looking at the symptoms, populations at risk, location of infection, how vitamin D levels make the viruses more susceptible, the tracking of symptoms, the body's response to each virus, and the causes of death for each virus. Respiratory viruses are common illnesses which affect someone's respiratory system. A respiratory system is a system of organs that help with gas exchange in order for us to breathe. Open nasal cavities are what allows for these viruses to enter our body. The virus becomes trapped in the mucus and is carried to the back of the throat and eventually swallowed. Once a respiratory virus has entered the body, it begins to seize human cells in order to gain control of a living cell to reproduce and survive within our bodies. These cells are considered to be host cells because a virus is not capable of reproducing on its own. The immune system is a network of cells, tissues, and organs which protect the organism from infections and diseases. The immune system is important because this is how our body fights foreign pathogens. The immune system can be broken down into two parts, the innate and adaptive. The innate and adaptive immune system are commonly known to work together to suppress the replication of viral pathogens. The innate immune system is a network of cellular and chemical defenses against foreign particles that enter the body. The adaptive immune system is sometimes also called the acquired immune system because it is built up over your lifetime. It contains specific cells and processes that aid in the method of disruption of pathogens growing and infecting the body. Two key pieces of the adaptive immune system are B cells and T cells, or white blood cells. T cells are responders in the adaptive immune system and are known to help fight against foreign substances. There are two types of T cells, helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells. The helper T cells have receptors that are used to help identify peptide fragments of proteins on the surface of infected cells and can use the information to inform other cells, including B cells. The major histocompatibility complex takes the peptides found on infected cells and presents them to T cells, where the receptors are able to recognize whether or not a cell is infected or healthy. T cells help to inform other cells by using chemical messengers called cytokines. These cytokines help to call upon B cells and aid in targeting the infected cells and can also help destroy infected cells that have been marked for cell death. B cells are known to secrete antibodies, a type of Y-shaped protein or immunoglobulin that helps fight off infections. They are specific to pieces of viruses, bacteria, or any other infectious agent that might enter the body. Some types of antibodies released by B cells are IgG, IgM, and IgA. These immunoglobulins are known to protect the body against viruses. They are used to either neutralize the virus or block interactions between healthy cells and the virus. To neutralize the virus, these immunoglobulins encase the foreign substance, which is called phagocytosis. Phagocytosis occurs after the antibody has encased the pathogen and destroys it. Antibodies that have gone through phagocytosis are marked for cell death or apoptosis. Antibodies block interactions by binding to antigens in order to make pathogens a different shape. This makes them not able to enter host cells to reproduce, therefore stopping the infection. The immune system's use of T cells and B cells are used to recognize these peptide fragments. This is one way of identifying infected cells. If the body has already come in contact with these fragments, the use of memory B cells and T cells are used to identify them. Memory T cells that have helped fight the infection previously can be called upon by receptors for a more rapid response to the infection. Memory B cells already know which specific antibodies to use for the infection and can react to the antigen more rapidly. Inflammation is the process of our body releasing chemicals in order to protect key organs from infections and suppresses viral replication. Inflammation occurs when the body is in distress. Physical aspects of inflammation are swelling, redness, pain, heat, and loss of a function. Damaged or infected cells release chemicals such as histamines, bradykinin, and prostaglandins to trigger the process of inflammation. Histamines and prostaglandins trigger an increase of blood flow to an injured or infected area. This is known as vasodilation and causes swelling to the body. Bradykinin, or a chemical released during inflammation, is found in the lungs and can cause a cough, sore throat, a stuffy nose, and trouble breathing. ACE2 is the receptor that is responsible for the metabolism of bradykinin. ACE2 is a protein receptor found in the epithelial cells in the respiratory tract. COVID-19 is the syndrome for coronavirus disease 2019. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus which is currently affecting people in this pandemic. Influenza has been around since 1918 and has 4 strains, A, B, C, and D. The seasonal flu that people typically get infected with is strain A. It is possible to contract all strains of the flu. Just getting one strain won't protect you from future infections of the flu. We decided that a comparison between COVID and influenza is important because we felt there was a lack of awareness about these 2 viruses, and we wanted to educate not only us, but others as well. Knowing the severity of COVID and the flu would help people to truly understand how important this pandemic is along with influenza. In the beginning of our research, we were expecting to find major differences between the flu and COVID-19. After we really looked at the 2, we found that they were much more similar than we thought. There is, however, a major difference in the cause of mortality for both viruses. We have summarized our findings throughout the remainder of this video. COVID-19 and influenza are both contagious respiratory illnesses. Influenza has an incubation period of 3 days, while COVID's incubation period is 5 to 6 days. With this knowledge, it suggests that the flu spreads more rapidly than COVID, but COVID has a longer recovery time. COVID-19 is thought to spread more rapidly because it takes longer to notice the symptoms than influenza, but we found this to be false.
Symptoms that are generally linked to both of these viruses include fever and chills, cough, congestion, body and headaches, fatigue, vomiting, and diarrhea. COVID-19 has additional symptoms including loss of taste and smell and shortness of breath. These symptoms happen because of a specific protein called ACE2, which are found in the nose and in the mouth. When COVID-19 binds to ACE2, the virus invades the nerve cells, which could potentially alter taste and smell. COVID-19 and influenza typically affect the population of individuals 50 years of age or older and people who are immunocompromised. The flu also infects populations of children younger than 2 and pregnant women. The population of children to young adults under 18 are less likely to get COVID-19 because when COVID-19 enters the respiratory tract through the nasal cavity, it binds to the ACE2 receptors. In children, they have less amounts of ACE2 receptors, making it less likely for COVID to bind to the receptor. Influenza is known to be a seasonal virus due to the change in seasons from highs and lows of vitamin D. From the curiosity of scientists, a study was done to see if levels of vitamin D also affect the susceptibility to COVID-19. The study found that 58% of the patients with COVID were found to be deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D plays a large role in the regulation of the immune system and also helps with the activation of T and B cells along the epithelial lining of the respiratory tract. The flu enters the body from droplets from sneezing and coughing from people within 6 feet of you. The droplets enter through the nasal cavity and, as previously mentioned, take over a host cell and then continue their cycle to reproduce in the body. Once the flu virus has taken control of the host cell in the lungs and upper respiratory tract, it replicates its DNA and starts the process of budding out from the cell. After the budding has started on the host cell, roaming T cells are able to identify these host cells as infected and work to signal the B cells to help fight against the pathogen. When these cells are called to the site of infection, they trigger the release of cytokines, which induce inflammation. The cause of death for the flu is a cytokine storm. A cytokine storm is when an overproduction of cytokines is occurring. When these numerous cytokines enter the blood quickly, it can lead to a severe response. Cytokine storms can be triggered by an infection, disease, or immune condition. Signs of a cytokine storm include inflammation, high fever, severe fatigue, and nausea. As previously mentioned, a vitamin D deficiency has been linked to the weakened immune system, which puts people at risk for COVID and the flu. Vitamin D plays a large role in the regulation of cytokines and inflammatory responses. If the regulation of cytokines is not monitored, it could cause a cytokine storm to occur, leading to death. COVID-19 enters the body the same way as the flu. Droplets from sneezing and coughing from a person within 6 feet of you. Once inside the body, COVID-19 finds a host cell in the lungs and upper respiratory tract. The virus takes over a healthy cell to create host cells and cause the cell to make more of the virus. Once the cell is filled with the virus particles, it will then break open, causing the cell to die. This process is called lyse. When the particles are released from the cell, they start circulating and infect more cells. T cells and B cells respond the same way as the flu, where the T cells recognize the infected host cells and signal the B cells to help fight the infection. Inflammation due to COVID is a signal from the lysing of the original host cell. From this process, pro-inflammatory proteins called pro-inflammatory cytokines are released. The cause of death for COVID-19 can either be a cytokine storm or a bradykinin storm. As previously mentioned, a cytokine storm is the overproduction of cytokines which are triggered by an infection, disease, or immune condition. A bradykinin storm is when there is a large release of bradykinin and it causes the dilation of blood vessels in the lungs, severe inflammation, and eventually leads to death. In relation to COVID, a bradykinin storm is a potential cause of death because when the virus binds to the ACE2 receptors, which in turn blocks taste and sense of smell, it also activates the release of the bradykinin. The storm is a result of COVID-19 and can potentially kill the patient if the storm severity is enough.
It's interesting when we consider the differences in public response and perception surrounding the coronavirus compared to the response that we see with the seasonal flu. When you compare these two viruses, they are similar in many respects, including the presentation of symptoms, the mode of transmission, the way that the virus actually enters the cell, and even the way that our body mounts an immune response. Yet, even though we know that influenza is a life-threatening disease, besides vaccination, there is very little that we do to protect ourselves each flu season. The pandemic has caused us to reevaluate the way we protect ourselves and the way that we protect those around us from infectious disease.
The two viruses have very similar symptoms, response by the immune system, their infected population, respiratory conditions, death by a cytokine storm, causation of deficiencies in vitamin D. Some differences we have come across are that COVID has additional symptoms such as loss of taste and smell. The flu affects pregnant women and young children more than COVID does, and the bradykinin storm is potentially a cause of death for COVID. Incubation and life on surfaces and onset of symptoms are also differences come across. Our findings have helped us learn that the flu and COVID-19 are quite similar. We expected to find more differences, but through our research, we couldn't. Our lack of hysteria around the seasonal flu is actually quite alarming. In many other countries, many more precautions are taken around flu season. So we thought, why is this? We believe this is because the flu has been around for so long that the hysteria around it has gone away as time has progressed, and less awareness on the severity of it has occurred. On the other hand, COVID-19 is the highlight of all news channels, and so much research and education is being centered around this new illness that we forgot how serious some other pre-existing illnesses are.
What I found is that there's a really interesting point of distinction between those US students, those students that are coming from other countries around the globe, and even those that come from countries such as Mexico or countries within Latin America. Certainly, with the student population, everybody's interested in the science. That believe in the science and actually trust in the infrastructure that's set up for them, those are actually doing much better than other communities that are being disproportionately affected by COVID right now. Those places where science is actually fact, where science isn't polarized, where science isn't sensationalized or used for a specific agenda, those are the places that are faring best in this pandemic.
We hope our video can help you understand why both of them should be taken seriously and how important it is to follow the CDC guidelines on both illnesses.